Fire. The Indiana Fever just made a sudden roster move after the Caitlin Clark injury scare, and now fans are convinced the franchise is in full emergency mode. Flushed face after Clark's shocking late scratch and the WNBA controversy that followed, the Fever reportedly dumped Shatori Walker-Kimbrough and now must urgently fill an open roster spot immediately. Critics online are now asking whether Indiana is scrambling behind the scenes after injuries, backlash, and mounting pressure surrounding the biggest star in women's basketball. According to critics online, the sudden roster move involving Indiana Fever and Shatori Walker-Kimbrough publicly exploded because many fans believe the organization emotionally is scrambling behind the scenes after the recent Caitlin Clark injury controversy. Social media users are now saying viewers think the Fever publicly look like a franchise suddenly operating under enormous pressure emotionally after injuries, league scrutiny, and non-stop backlash all collided at once. According to the internet, many fans emotionally interpreted the decision to move on from Shatori Walker-Kimbrough publicly as proof that Indiana allegedly feels immediate urgency surrounding roster depth and backcourt stability. Critics online are now debating whether the organization publicly believes Clark's recent health concerns emotionally may force bigger adjustments than fans originally expected. Fans are especially reacting because the Fever publicly already looked emotionally stretched thin before this latest roster move happened. According to critics online, Clark's back injury scare, the WNBA warning over injury reporting, and constant pressure surrounding the team publicly created emotional instability around the franchise before the roster situation even surfaced. Social media users are now saying many viewers believe the Fever publicly cannot afford any additional uncertainty emotionally involving Caitlin Clark because the entire organization allegedly revolves around her availability right now. And honestly, critics think that emotional dependence publicly is exactly why the roster move exploded into such a huge conversation online. According to the internet, many fans believe every personnel decision publicly now gets emotionally tied back to Clark somehow because of how important she allegedly became to the team, the fan base, and even the league itself. According to critics, another major reason the backlash publicly intensified is because many fans emotionally liked Shatori Walker-Kimbrough's veteran presence publicly on the roster. Social media users are now saying supporters think removing experienced depth publicly during a season already filled with injuries and chaos emotionally feels risky unless the organization allegedly believes a bigger emergency situation is developing behind the scenes. Fans are especially discussing how quickly the Fever publicly shifted emotionally from excitement about playoff potential to non-stop damage control narratives. According to critics online, the team allegedly entered the season expected to build around Clark's superstardom publicly, but instead fans emotionally keep finding themselves discussing injuries, roster instability, coaching criticism, and league investigations. Critics online are also saying the timing publicly made everything feel emotionally dramatic because the Fever reportedly now must fill the open roster spot quickly. According to the internet, many viewers believe the urgency publicly suggests Indiana allegedly recognizes serious depth concerns emotionally if more injuries happen. Social media users are now debating whether the organization publicly is preparing emotionally for heavier workloads on the remaining guards or possibly protecting itself in case Clark's back issue lingers longer than expected. According to critics, another layer publicly fueling speculation emotionally is the perception that Clark allegedly already carries too much responsibility physically and mentally. Fans continue discussing the emotional toll publicly of Clark handling scoring, playmaking, media attention, ticket sales pressure, and league expectations simultaneously, while also battling recurring physical issues. Fans are especially reacting because many viewers think the Fever publicly now look emotionally reactive instead of stable. According to critics online, supporters allegedly expected Indiana to project calm confidence publicly around the league's biggest superstar, but critics think the constant emergency-style headlines emotionally are starting to make the franchise feel chaotic. And honestly, critics believe every new controversy publicly keeps strengthening fears emotionally that the Fever may not fully be prepared for the pressure that comes with managing the most important player in women's basketball. At the same time, supporters of Indiana Fever continue arguing the move publicly may simply reflect normal roster management emotionally rather than panic. Some fans believe teams constantly adjust depth during long seasons, and that social media allegedly is turning an ordinary basketball decision into unnecessary drama. But according to critics online, perception publicly now matters enormously emotionally because every move involving Indiana instantly becomes national conversation once Caitlin Clark's name is attached. And honestly, that's why this story publicly exploded across sports media so fast. Because according to the internet, many fans no longer think they're simply watching a routine roster transaction emotionally anymore. Critics now believe they may be witnessing a franchise publicly scrambling under historic pressure while trying desperately to stabilize the situation around the single biggest star currently carrying the future spotlight of the entire WNBA. According to critics online, the reason the roster situation involving Indiana Fever and Shatori Walker-Kimbrough publicly became such a massive conversation is because many fans believe the organization emotionally is no longer operating from a position of comfort. Social media users are now saying viewers think the Fever publicly are suddenly being forced into reactive decisions emotionally after the Caitlin Clark injury scare exposed how fragile the roster may actually be. According to the internet, many fans emotionally connected the roster move publicly to the growing physical concerns surrounding Caitlin Clark over the past 2 seasons. Critics online are now discussing Clark's back soreness, previous quad issues, ankle concerns, and the non-stop physical punishment she absorbs publicly every night from defenses built specifically to stop her. Fans are especially reacting because many viewers believe Clark publicly already carries one of the heaviest workloads emotionally in the entire league. According to critics online, Clark allegedly handles scoring pressure, playmaking responsibility, media obligations, franchise expectations, and league-wide attention simultaneously while still being early in her professional career. Social media users are now saying many supporters think Indiana publicly cannot afford even the smallest roster instability emotionally because so much of the team's offensive identity allegedly revolves around Clark's presence. And honestly, critics think that emotional dependence publicly is exactly why fans became nervous after the Shatori move. According to the internet, many viewers believe the Fever publicly look vulnerable emotionally if Clark misses significant time because the entire structure of the offense changes dramatically without her on the floor. According to critics, another major reason the backlash publicly intensified is because supporters allegedly expected the Fever to prioritize continuity emotionally around Clark this season rather than more uncertainty. Social media users are now debating whether the organization publicly truly has a long-term stable plan emotionally or whether the franchise allegedly keeps making adjustments under pressure week after week. Fans are especially discussing the emotional optics publicly surrounding the timing of the move. According to critics online, many viewers think it looked alarming emotionally that the roster decision happened so quickly after the WNBA warning and Clark injury controversy dominated headlines. Critics online are also saying many fans publicly interpreted the urgency emotionally as evidence that Indiana allegedly recognizes it has depth concerns that can no longer be ignored. According to the internet, supporters are now speculating publicly about possible free agent additions, emergency signings, or rotational changes emotionally if injuries continue piling up. Social media users are now debating whether the Fever publicly underestimated how difficult it would emotionally be to build around a player with Clark's style and usage level. Critics think many fans allegedly now realize the roster publicly must constantly adapt emotionally because Clark plays at such a high pace and creates so much offensive responsibility. According to critics, another layer publicly fueling concern emotionally is the fear that constant instability could eventually wear Clark down mentally as well as physically. Fans are discussing how emotionally exhausting it must allegedly feel publicly to operate under non-stop scrutiny while also dealing with injuries, coaching debates, roster changes, and constant media attention surrounding the team. Fans are especially reacting because many viewers think Clark publicly continues handling everything emotionally with composure despite the chaos around her. According to critics online, supporters believe Clark allegedly rarely complains publicly even while carrying pressure levels almost unprecedented for a second-year WNBA player. And honestly, Critics think that calm public image publicly may actually increase fan frustration emotionally because supporters feel the need to protect Clark online themselves. According to the internet, many viewers believe the Fever publicly are receiving harsher criticism emotionally because fans think the organization allegedly should be making Clark's environment easier, not more chaotic. At the same time, supporters of Indiana Fever continue arguing the internet publicly is massively overreacting emotionally to a normal basketball transaction. Some fans believe roster adjustments publicly happen constantly across professional sports, and that social media allegedly only turns Indiana's moves into national drama because Caitlin Clark is involved. But according to critics online, perception publicly now shapes almost everything emotionally surrounding the Fever. Social media users are now saying many viewers believe every roster move, injury report, coaching comment, or substitution publicly becomes emotionally magnified because the spotlight around Caitlin Clark has become bigger than the entire franchise itself. And honestly, that's why this story publicly keeps getting louder across sports media. Because according to the internet, many fans no longer think they're simply watching a routine roster change emotionally anymore. Critics now believe they may be watching a franchise publicly struggling to stabilize itself under historic pressure while trying to protect the single most important athlete currently driving the future visibility and momentum of the entire WNBA. According to critics online, the reason the roster drama involving Indiana Fever publicly keeps growing is because many fans believe the organization emotionally is now facing a much bigger test than simply replacing Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. Social media users are now saying viewers think the Fever publicly must prove they can actually create a stable, protected environment emotionally around Caitlin Clark before the pressure surrounding the franchise spirals even further. According to the internet, many fans emotionally believe the Clark injury scare publicly exposed how vulnerable the entire organization allegedly becomes the second her availability is uncertain. Critics online are now saying supporters think Indiana publicly looked completely shaken emotionally once Clark was ruled out because so much of the team's identity, media attention, and offensive structure revolves around her presence. Fans are especially reacting because many viewers believe Clark publicly is carrying expectations emotionally far beyond normal basketball pressure. According to critics online, Clark allegedly represents television ratings, ticket sales, sponsorship growth, national headlines, and even the future business momentum of the WNBA itself. Social media users are now saying many supporters think the Fever publicly cannot afford instability emotionally around a player carrying that level of importance. And honestly, critics think that emotional reality publicly is exactly why every roster move suddenly feels enormous online. According to the internet, many viewers believe fans publicly are no longer judging Indiana emotionally like an ordinary basketball team. Critics think supporters now evaluate every decision through the lens of, are they maximizing and protecting Caitlin Clark or not? According to critics, another major reason the situation publicly intensified is because supporters allegedly feel the Fever emotionally keep reacting to problems instead of staying ahead of them. Social media users are now saying many fans believe the franchise publicly appears stuck in constant damage control mode emotionally involving injuries, roster changes, controversy, and coaching debates. Fans are especially discussing the emotional fear publicly that Clark could eventually become physically worn down if the organization allegedly fails to build enough depth and stability around her. According to critics online, supporters continue pointing toward the heavy minutes, physical defensive pressure, and enormous offensive workload Clark constantly handles publicly every single game. Critics online are also saying the timing publicly made everything feel emotionally dangerous because the Fever already faced backlash involving injury reporting before this roster issue emerged. According to the internet, many viewers think the franchise publicly now looks emotionally overwhelmed by the level of scrutiny attached to every Caitlin Clark development. Social media users are now debating whether Indiana publicly underestimated what comes emotionally with having the biggest star in women's basketball. Critics believe many fans allegedly expected the organization to operate publicly with total precision, transparency, and confidence around Clark, not with constant confusion and emergency reactions. According to critics, Another layer publicly fueling concern emotionally is the fear that nonstop chaos could eventually affect Clark mentally as well as physically. Fans are discussing the emotional exhaustion publicly that could come from constantly navigating injuries, criticism, roster instability, coaching drama, and historic expectations all at once. Fans are especially reacting because many viewers think Clark publicly continues protecting the organization emotionally during interviews despite everything happening around her. According to critics online, supporters believe Clark allegedly consistently avoids throwing teammates or coaches under the bus publicly even while social media chaos surrounding the fever keeps intensifying. And honestly, critics think that emotional maturity publicly may actually make fans even more protective of Clark online. According to the internet, many viewers believe supporters emotionally feel the need to defend Clark publicly because she allegedly refuses to create public drama herself despite carrying enormous pressure. At the same time, supporters of Indiana Fever continue arguing the internet publicly is turning ordinary roster management emotionally into unnecessary panic. Some fans believe every team deals with injuries and depth adjustments publicly during long seasons, and that Indiana allegedly is simply handling difficult circumstances under an unusually massive spotlight. But according to critics online, the biggest issue publicly now may be perception emotionally more than basketball itself. Social media users are now saying many viewers believe every new controversy publicly strengthens the narrative emotionally that the Fever may not fully be prepared for the pressure that comes with managing the single most important player currently driving the WNBA's explosion in popularity. And honestly, that's why this story publicly keeps dominating sports conversations. Because according to the internet, many fans no longer think they're simply watching a routine roster adjustment emotionally anymore. Critics now believe they may be watching a franchise publicly fighting to stabilize itself under historic pressure while trying desperately to protect the generational superstar carrying the future spotlight, business growth, and national attention of women's basketball. Now, the internet is completely divided over everything involving Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark, and the sudden roster chaos publicly. Some fans believe the Fever allegedly are simply making necessary basketball decisions emotionally during a difficult stretch filled with injuries and pressure. Others argue the constant emergency-style headlines publicly surrounding the franchise emotionally are becoming impossible to ignore. But according to critics online, the biggest concern publicly now is whether the Fever allegedly truly understand how important stability around Caitlin Clark has become emotionally, not just for Indiana, but for the entire WNBA itself. Social media users are now saying many fans believe every injury scare, roster move, coaching controversy, and public misstep emotionally keeps increasing pressure around the single most important player currently driving women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight. According to the internet, supporters are now watching every move publicly from Indiana emotionally moving forward. Who will the Fever bring in to replace Shatori Walker-Kimbrough? Will the organization publicly stabilize the roster emotionally before more injuries hit? Or do you think fans are completely overreacting because every single Indiana Fever headline publicly now turns into national drama the second Caitlin Clark's name gets attached? And honestly, that's the question completely dominating sports conversations right now. Do you think Indiana Fever are handling the pressure around Caitlin Clark correctly publicly? Or do you think the franchise emotionally looks overwhelmed trying to manage the biggest star the WNBA has seen in decades?